The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character. My dad stood up at the Thanksgiving table. The chandelier light above us washed his face in a pale glow that made the moment feel more like a funeral speech than a family announcement. "We are selling the family company," he said. "And you are getting nothing." My brother's lips curled into a small, satisfied smirk. My sister started clapping immediately, her bracelets chiming together as if the news were something worth celebrating. The knife I was holding froze halfway across my plate. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't angry either, I was simply waiting. Then I asked the only thing that actually mattered. "Who is the buyer?" I asked. My father straightened his shoulders and lifted his chin. The confidence in his expression was the kind that came from believing you had already won. "Summit Group," he answered, "for $65 million." I smiled because the truth was already sitting right there at the table with him. He just had no idea what I was about to take back from him next. I grew up in a house where silence had its own hierarchy. My father did most of the talking. My brother echoed whatever he said. My sister performed for attention. And I learned early how to occupy as little space as possible. The dining room table in our Boston suburb always felt like a stage where I was never meant to stand. Even when I was very young, I remember sitting at the far end of the table. My legs dangled above the floor while the rest of them talked over dinner. They praised my brother endlessly for winning a debate competition at school, calling him a natural leader. Meanwhile, the coding trophy I had proudly placed on the kitchen counter stayed there untouched until my mother quietly moved it to a shelf in the back hallway where no one would notice it. That pattern never really changed. By the time I became a teenager, my father had already decided who the future of the company would be. My brother. He was meant to carry the legacy forward. The strange part was that my brother had absolutely no interest in software or systems. His real passions were fast boats, expensive jackets, and vacations with friends whose names rotated every few months. Still, my father slapped him on the back like he was watching greatness unfold. My sister carved out her own role in the family by becoming perfect for the internet. She staged photo shoots on the front lawn and filmed videos from her bedroom window. She would list her follower counts the way some people recite prayers. My father didn't mind at all. As long as the family looked polished and impressive online, she had his full approval. She worked tirelessly to keep that image intact. And then there was me. I discovered peace in my room at an old wooden desk with a laptop that hummed softly through the night. When the rest of my life felt like something already planned for me, coding gave me worlds where I could decide everything. Sometimes my father would walk past my open door and glance inside. "It's nice to have hobbies, sweetheart," he would say, "but real business requires instinct." He never stayed long enough to see what I was actually building. The moment everything shifted happened when I was 23. I had spent months designing a new system. It was cloud-based and scalable, the kind of platform that could drag the company into the modern world. I prepared everything: documents, graphs, projections, financial models. I checked every detail twice. My mother told me she was proud. My father told me not to get my hopes up. The boardroom smelled like coffee and old leather chairs the day I walked in with my laptop. The table was filled with men who had known my father for decades. They watched me the way people watch a quiet child who wandered into the wrong room. I connected my laptop and started the presentation. My hands stayed steady. My voice stayed calm. 10 minutes in, my father lifted his hand. He sighed softly through his nose and gave me a polite smile that felt like he was patiently waiting for a commercial break to end. "That's enough," he said. "Interesting ideas, but not realistic. Our clients aren't looking for experiments." A few of the men chuckled. Someone murmured, "Kids and their theories." I closed my laptop. I stacked the papers neatly so the edges wouldn't bend. No one offered to help. No one asked a question. As I walked out, the room filled again with their smooth, confident voices, the kind that never get interrupted. That was the day I understood my place in the family. That was the day silence became my armor. The years that followed passed slowly, like dust settling on shelves no one bothers to clean. Holidays turned into carefully choreographed events where everyone kept their distance. My father discussed business with my brother. My sister filmed the house for her followers. And I slipped quietly into corners where no one noticed me. But the moment that finally cracked everything open did not come with shouting. It arrived with a clean, quiet cut. Last Thanksgiving, my flight landed late. Cold air still clung to my coat when I stepped into the house. The hallway smelled like roasted squash and expensive candles. My sister waved her phone around while talking to her audience about her outfit. My brother complained loudly about the stress of managing clients he barely understood. No one asked how I was. I wasn't surprised. What bothered me wasn't the noise, it was what was missing. My name wasn't on any of the place cards. Every year my mother wrote them out carefully in her tidy handwriting. One card for every seat. That night there were only 5. Mine wasn't there. My father barely looked up when I walked in. "Oh, Sarah," he said, "sit anywhere. Just sit anywhere." My brother and sister sat beside him like polished trophies he had spent years displaying. I slid into the empty chair at the far end near the hallway. The legs scraped softly against the wooden floor. My sister didn't notice. My brother just smirked as if the arrangement made perfect sense. During dinner, my father talked about future plans. He never once used the word we. At one point, my brother claimed credit for bringing in a major client. I knew the truth. That client had only contacted the company because of a white paper I wrote years earlier, the same paper my father once called pointless before filing it away. I didn't interrupt. I held my spoon halfway to my mouth and listened as they rewrote history. When dessert arrived, my father raised a glass. "To my 2 hardworking children," he said. He looked down the table at my brother and sister. He never looked at my end of the table. I didn't get angry. I didn't ask why. I placed my spoon back onto the plate and smiled. That silence followed me all the way back to San Francisco. My apartment overlooks the water. The view used to make me feel small. That night, it felt like the only thing wide enough to hold what I had carried for years. I dropped my bag, hung up my coat, and switched on the lamp beside my desk. Then I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked patiently on the screen. So did I for most of my life. Being ignored made me want to disappear. This time it made me build something. Clarity has a strange temperature. It feels cold but sharp. When you realize no one will ever offer you a seat at their table, the only logical thing left is to build your own. I started by reviewing the finances of the company I had quietly created after leaving home. There was no logo, no press releases. Just years of writing code and signing contracts under a different name. I hired people who believed in the systems I built, not in the last name I carried. The numbers were climbing. We were profitable. Then I opened another tab. I pulled up the reports for my father's company. On the surface, everything looked healthy. Clean reports, confident charts. Underneath, the truth was obvious. The company was dying, slowly but steadily. Old equipment, outdated systems, clients drifting away to competitors with better technology. I took a sip of water and placed the glass carefully back on the desk. Then I began collecting what I needed: contracts, payment histories, supplier relationships. Notes from acquisitions and internal audits. Records from old meetings about mergers in the software industry. Every file went into a clearly labeled folder. The quiet clicks of my mouse created a steady rhythm in the room. I studied every partner my father relied on. Each one was a puzzle piece. I looked for weaknesses, for openings. My company began purchasing shares quietly and legally. I used intermediaries so no one would connect the strategy to me. There was no hacking, no lies, just patience. Every move was deliberate. By winter, I owned stakes in several suppliers that kept my father's company operational. By spring, I had enough influence to suggest collaborative projects. By summer, I assembled a full acquisition plan. The offer came through a firm he would never suspect, one designed to integrate seamlessly with my own systems. The proposal went through representatives. I waited. The rejection came quickly, dismissive, brief. He barely reviewed the documents. He treated the offer the same way he treated me, so I improved it. I strengthened the structure, refined the numbers, brought in analysts to confirm the logic. By early fall, the final version was ready, the one he wouldn't be able to refuse. It had board interest and market analysis, proving the company was collapsing because it refused to modernize. During all those months, my family never once asked where I was, not on my birthday. Not during holidays, not during the meetings they proudly posted online. The silence didn't hurt anymore, it simply clarified things. One night, my best friend, who had known me back when I survived on cheap noodles and second-hand furniture, asked a question. "Are you sure you want to tie yourself to them again?" she said. I did not answer her right away. I just opened my laptop again, and the light from the screen made my face look white and cold. "This is not about going back," I said. "This is about drawing the line they never thought I would ever reach." My friend just nodded. It was the kind of nod you give someone who is finally telling a truth they have kept inside for 10 years. The night before Thanksgiving, I sat in my office by myself. Everyone else had gone home. I could hear the heater humming and the sound of footsteps disappearing down the hallway. The water outside my window was dark and still. I looked at the buying file one last time. I checked the records, the signatures, and the notes. I sent the final version to the lawyers. Every move was small and almost invisible, but each one had the weight of all those years when people talked over me or ignored me. When everything was ready, I shut my laptop. I slid it into my bag next to the folder of printed papers. I put my name card case on top of everything. It was made of cold, brushed metal, and it felt heavy in my fingers. I moved everything around until it was perfectly straight, then I breathed out. The next morning, I got on a plane to Boston. The sky was flat and gray. It was a quiet and focused color. My father's house looked the same as it always did. It was big and cold and decorated for guests who were never me. I walked in carrying nothing dramatic. I had no speeches and no anger. I just had the tools of a woman who had spent 10 years becoming someone they never thought I would be. I put my bag in my old room. The dust on my old trophies shone in the morning light. I let the silence stay there for a second while I thought about who I used to be and who I had become. Then I walked downstairs with a folder under my arm. For the first time, I wasn't coming back as a daughter. I was coming back as a decision. This time, I was not going to fix the things they had broken. Thanksgiving dinner began just like it always did. Dad sat at the head of the table. Brother sat right next to him like an understudy, waiting for his cue to speak. Sister was live streaming the centerpiece on the table as if it were a celebrity. I sat at the very far end in the spot where the sound was dim and where decisions were never made. Dessert had just been placed on the table when Dad tapped his knife against his wine glass. The whole room went quiet. "We are selling the family business," he said. His voice sounded warm and he looked very satisfied with himself. "And you are getting nothing." Brother laughed at that. Sister started clapping. Their reactions looked so rehearsed that they might as well have practiced them in front of a mirror. I did not move at all. The candle closest to me flickered, bending toward the empty space between us. I lifted my eyes and looked at him. "Dad," I said in an even tone, "who is the buyer?" He straightened his back, looking pleased that I had asked. "A firm called Summit Group," he said. "They are paying $65 million. A murmur went around the table. Brother's eyebrows went up and he looked suddenly greedy. Sister whispered the number into her phone like she was sharing breaking news. I pressed my fingertip to the stem of my water glass and aligned it perfectly with the edge of my plate. Then I smiled. "Dad," I said quietly, "I am Summit Group." The reaction happened in waves. Sister's phone slipped out of her hand and hit the floor. Brother's fork made a loud clattering sound against his plate. Mom breathed in sharply and her wine glass started trembling in her hand. Dad did not move at first. He just blinked at me as if the room had shifted positions without anyone telling him. "That is not possible," he finally said. There was a thin, sharp edge in his voice. "Summit Group is run by someone named Sarah Stone." I finished the sentence for him. "Yes, that is me." He studied my face with the same look he had given me in that boardroom 10 years ago. He was trying to figure out what he had missed. I reached into my bag and took out the small metal case. I opened it and slid one name card across the polished wood table. The logo was very simple and stark. The name printed beneath it was mine. Dad did not pick it up, but Brother did. He snatched it as if it might have a loophole in it. "This is a joke," Brother said, and his voice cracked. "You do not have the money for this." "I built it," I said, "contract by contract and acquisition by acquisition. I did it quietly and I did it legally." Mom finally spoke up. "Sarah," she said, all these years," I echoed back to her. Dad leaned forward toward me. "Even if this were true, which it isn't, the board would never approve a sale to you." "They already did," I said. "It was unanimous." I took the folder out of my bag and set it down next to the name card. I opened it so the pages with the signatures were facing him. The color drained out of his face and then all his power seemed to disappear. "You manipulated them," he said. "No," I told him. I followed the process. I did the advisory review, the legal compliance, and the market valuation. It was all standard procedure. I paused for a second. It was everything you taught us to respect. Brother shoved his chair back from the table. "This is not fair," he said. "I have worked there for years." I looked at him with a steady gaze. "I know about the vendor payments, Jason," I said. "I know about the false billing and the offshore transfers." His face froze completely. I could file a report, I added. I kept my voice sounding clinically neutral. Or you can repay the money and resign quietly. Sister swallowed hard and looked at me. What about me? She asked. You can stay, I told her, but you will work in the media branding unit. You will have to provide actual deliverables. There will be no more image without a real contribution. Dad finally stood up. He braced his hands on the table. You expect me to accept this? You expect me to hand my company and my legacy over to you? I did not raise my voice at him. I am not asking you to accept it. I said, it is already done. A heavy silence spread across the room like a slow tide. It felt inevitable and heavy, and it reshaped everything it touched. Dad sank back down into his chair. The realization was landing on him one breath at a time. You planned this for 10 years, he said. I did it to save what you were losing, not to destroy you, I said. Nobody spoke after that. Not brother, whose whole world had just gotten smaller. Not sister, whose phone stayed on the table with a dark screen. Not mom, whose eyes looked soft with a kind of grief she couldn't name. The dessert candles burned low, the clock on the wall kept ticking, and for the first time in my entire life, the silence belonged to me. 6 months passed before I noticed how different the world felt when nobody was trying to make me feel small. The building that used to hold my father's company looked different now. We did a lot of work on it. We put in glass to replace the heavy curtains, and we made open spaces instead of keeping all the doors closed. I walked past the old conference room, the same one where my father had stopped my talk in the middle of a sentence 10 years ago. Now that room was full of soft light from a new window we put in the ceiling. When I walked by it, I did not speed up or look away. I just took a deep breath. My father took the job as an advisor that I offered him. He had no real authority, but he was still there. For the first few weeks, everything was very stiff and formal between us. But then something started to soften. He stopped giving long lectures during our meetings. He actually started to listen. Sometimes I would catch him just watching the younger developers as they explained how the new work flowed. He had a look on his face that was a mix of being confused and feeling a little bit of wonder. My brother paid back every cent that he owed. He went back to school to study. For the first time ever, he sent me a message that was not asking me for a favor. I actually really like this class I am taking, the message said. I did not text him back right away. I read the words twice and then I quietly set my phone down on the table. My sister built a whole new media unit for the company. She was doing real work now with real numbers to prove it. She made an internal video about women who work in the tech industry. She did not mention how many followers she had a single time. When she showed the final version to me, she wasn't looking for a compliment. She was looking for an honest opinion. What is your feedback on this? She asked. I told her what I thought. She just nodded her head and looked very serious while she listened to me. Back at my home in San Francisco, my mornings started to feel different. I would sit by the window with a cup of coffee. I watched the steam rise up, and it felt like a reminder of a breath I had been holding in for way too long. The bay was moving just like it always did, slow and steady. But I could see it with more clarity now. My apartment had not changed, but the quiet feeling inside of me had. Some nights I walked past my old trophies from when I was a kid. I had brought them out west with me after I changed the company. I did not dust them or try to arrange them in a special way. I just let them sit there. What those trophies stood for was not something I felt like I had to prove anymore. One evening, I had to go back to Boston for a business review. As I was leaving the office, I took a look into the dining room where everything had fallen apart on that Thanksgiving. The table was completely empty now. There were no candles and there was no clapping. The chairs were all pushed in neatly. It was silent again, but this time the silence felt like air that I could finally breathe. In the months that followed, being far away did not feel like I was abandoning them. It felt like I was making a choice. The boundaries I made did not close any doors. They just made everything more clear. My family acted differently around me now. It wasn't because they were scared of me, but because they finally recognized who I was. I did not need their permission to take up space anymore. They finally understood that there was never anything small about what I had built. I stood one more time at that long dining table. The sunlight was hitting the polished wood. There were no loud voices, no corrections, and no acting for a camera. It was just a quiet truth finally settling into place. Sometimes the silence that stays is the part you actually get to keep.